On the morning of my 16th birthday, they fastened pearls at my throat the way you fasten a promise, tight enough to remind you who owns it. I stood in the blue room, where my mother kept the mirrors bright and the curtains heavy, and two women circled me like moons, Matilda pinning my hair, Odette smoothing the lace at my wrists. Their fingers were quick, practiced, silent. They belonged to my household the way the pianoforte belonged to my parlor. Objects that moved when I wished them to move. I had never called it cruelty. I had called it order. Outside, the house breathed itself awake. A servant's footfall on the gallery, the clink of silver. A man's laugh from the courtyard, the scent of orange blossoms and beeswax polish. The world arranging itself to honor me. "Hold still, Miss Marianne," Matilda murmured, and the name sounded like something made of sugar. Miss Marianne, daughter of Cyprus saint, heir of Duval blood. The girl who would step into womanhood tonight beneath chandeliers, with 100 eyes measuring my waist and my prospects. The last pin slid into place. Odette stepped back, her gaze flicking over my face with a strange, uneasy thoroughness, as if she were searching for a seam. I turned toward the mirror, expecting to see the same thing I always saw. Pale skin, dark hair, a mouth my mother said I inherited from her people in Bordeaux. What I saw was a girl dressed like a mistress, yes, silk, lace, pearls, but with eyes that looked older than 16. Not wiser, just braced. That was when the knock came. Not the gentle tap of a maid, not the polite rap of a caller. A hard, official sound that made every mirror in that room seem suddenly ridiculous. Odette flinched. Matilda's hand froze at my shoulder. The door opened without waiting. A man stepped into the blue room wearing the color of law. Not a uniform exactly. No soldier's brass, but a dark coat cut sharp, boots polished, a folded paper already in his hand. Behind him, two others hovered like shadows made solid. My mother followed, breathless, her hand lifted as if she could physically stop whatever was moving toward us. "Marianne," she said, and in her voice, my name wasn't Sugar anymore. It was a warning. The man's eyes met mine. He did not bow. He did not smile. He did not look away, even though I was half-dressed in celebration and he was intruding like an insult. "Marianne Duval?" he asked. I lifted my chin the way I had been taught. "Yes," he unfolded the paper. "By order of the parish court, you are to be taken into custody pending determination of status." Custody. Status. Words that belong to criminals in disputes over land. My mother stepped forward, her face draining of color. "This is a mistake. This is my daughter. She is—" The man held up his hand, palm out. A barrier. "Madame Duval, you may address your concerns to the court. Today, I am here to execute." Execute. Another word that belonged to a different world. One of the men behind him produced iron. I stared at it. I actually stared as if it were a trick, as if the metal could be explained by some harmless purpose. But I recognized it, the way you recognize lightning by instinct. Cuffs linked by a short chain. I heard myself laugh. One sharp, stunned sound. "Sir, you cannot be serious." He did not blink. "Step forward." My mouth went dry. I have done nothing." "You are not accused of a crime," he said. "You are subject to inquiry." Inquiry into what? My blood? My birth? The very right I had assumed was stitched into my skin. My mother's fingers closed around my arm so tight it hurt. "No," she whispered, "not to him. Into my hair, into my ear, as if the word could burrow into me and hide there. No, no, no." The man's gaze slid past me to my mother. "Madame, if you resist, you will be arrested as well." Her lips parted. She did not breathe. In that pause, in that helplessness, I felt something shift under my ribs. Not fear, not yet. Something colder, something like the floor deciding it was no longer interested in staying beneath your feet. "Mother," I said low, "tell him he's wrong." She looked at me, truly looked, and for a heartbeat I saw a thing in her eyes I had never seen before. Guilt. The man stepped closer. The cuffs caught the light from the window like a cruel joke. "Step forward," he repeated. Odette made a small sound, half prayer, half protest. Matilda's eyes were fixed on my throat, on the pearls. I did not step forward. I said, because my upbringing was a weapon, and I had been taught to swing it. "I am Marianne Duval. I have an invitation list for this evening, sir. The priest will be here. The judge will be here. My father—" The room tightened around the word. Father. My father had been buried 9 weeks ago. The man's mouth twitched, not sympathy, something like satisfaction. "Your father's estate is precisely why we are here." He turned the paper so I could see it, as if ink could explain the chain. It bore a seal. It bore a signature I recognized from documents my father once made me practice reading. The clerk of court. And beneath it, in the blunt language of property and flesh, were words I could not make fit inside my world. Petition filed by Edmund LaRue, executor and claimant. Evidence presented regarding maternal lineage under the law of partus sequitur ventrum. Subject is to be held for sale pending judgment. Sale. The room went silent in the way churches go silent when someone collapses. My mother's hand slipped from my arm as if the heat of me burned her. "Mother," I said again, but it came out as something smaller. Her eyes fell. Her throat moved, trying to swallow a scream. The man nodded to his assistant. Iron touched my wrist. I jerked back, instinctive, offended. "Don't you dare!" His grip was stronger than mine. He snapped one cuff shut. The sound was not loud. It was final. The second cuff closed around my other wrist. In the mirror, the pearls and the iron sat together on my body like two contradictory truths, like a lie wearing its consequence. I stood there in silk, chained like a thief. And in that moment, before anyone dragged me from my birthday, before any crowd watched me become a spectacle, I understood the first cruel lesson of the world I had been born into. Everything I had called mine, my name, my house, my future, had always been conditional. Conditional on blood. Conditional on somebody else's secret. Conditional on a truth that could be sold. They led me through the hallway as if I were already no longer a person. I saw the portraits my father had commissioned. His face stern, my mother's mouth poised, my own childhood self painted in white muslin, hair loose, a ribbon at my waist. In the painting, I looked innocent and expensive. I looked like something you would protect. A footman opened the front doors. Sunlight struck my face. The courtyard was full. Workers, house servants, stable boys, men standing with hats in their hands because it was my birthday, and there were preparations to honor me. Some stared openly, some pretended not to see, some looked at my wrists and then looked away fast, as if eye contact were dangerous. I searched for one face, one anchor. Odette stood on the steps behind us. Her hands clenched at her apron. Her eyes were bright with a fury she had no right to show. Our eyes met. And for the first time in my life, I saw her not as an attendant to my world, but as someone watching her own nightmare arrive at my door. I wanted to ask her what she knew. I wanted to ask her if she had suspected, if all the servants had whispered while I slept. But the lawman pushed me forward. A carriage waited. Not my carriage. A plain wagon with bars across the windows. A thing used to move criminals and runaways. They put me inside. The door shut. The courtyard became a framed picture through iron slats. Cypress Saints' white columns. The oak alley. the shimmer of the river beyond, the people frozen mid-task like statues that had learned to breathe. My mother stood on the steps, too still. When the wagon lurched, she moved at last. She ran forward, her skirts gathered, her hair slipping loose from its pins like she had been undone from inside. "Mary Ann," she called. I pressed my face to the bars. "Mother!" The wagon bumped over stone, pulling me away. She reached the side, fingers scrabbling at the iron as if she could pry it apart. Her eyes were wild. She did not look like a lady. She looked like a woman who had run out of lies. "Listen to me," she said, breathless, voice breaking. "No matter what they say, no matter what they call you, you must—" The man on the bench snapped the reins. The wagon surged. My mother stumbled. The last thing I saw was her falling to her knees on the gravel, her hands lifted like she was praying to the departing wheels. And then Cypress Saint disappeared behind trees, and my life as a mistress ended not with a farewell, but with a chain tugging my wrists raw. They took me to town like contraband. St. James Parish was not far, but it felt like crossing into a different country. The road that had always been mine to ride in comfort, mine to watch from a shaded seat, became a gauntlet. People on porches stared. Children ran alongside until a shout sent them back. A man in a shop doorway laughed and spat. At the courthouse, they did not bring me through the front like a citizen. They took me around back through a narrow door that smelled of damp stone and old fear. A cell waited. "I demand to speak to the judge," I said, because demand was the only verb I knew. The deputy shrugged. "You'll speak when you're spoken to." I stared at him. "Do you know who I am?" He looked at my dress, at the pearls, at the chain. His gaze slid over me with a kind of greedy curiosity. "I know what you might be," he said, "and that's why you're in there." He shoved me into the cell. The door clanged shut. The air inside was stale and close. A bucket sat in the corner. Straw lay scattered like shed hair. In the dimness, two women looked up from the floor where they sat. One was older, her face worn hard by sun and worry. The other was young, maybe my age, with swollen eyes and a bruise on her cheek. They stared at me as if I were a story they had heard and didn't believe. The older one spoke first. "Well," she said, voice flat, "ain't this something?" I swallowed. My throat felt bruised from holding back screams. "Why am I here?" The younger woman gave a bitter laugh that sounded like it hurt. "You tell us." I looked down at my silk, at my cuffs. The absurdity of it made me dizzy. "This is a mistake," I insisted even now. "I'm Mary Ann Duval." The older woman's eyes flicked to my hands. "Mary Ann Duval," she repeated slowly. "That the one they say ain't a Duval at all?" My stomach lurched. "Who says that?" The younger woman leaned forward, chains clinking at her ankles. "Everybody," she said, "when they got something to gain." I pressed my back against the wall, suddenly aware that my body was taking up space in a room built to remind people they were small. "What evidence?" I whispered, as if evidence could be argued away like a rumor. The older woman's gaze sharpened. "They say your mama ain't your mama." My breath caught. I heard my mother's voice in the blue room. Guilt. "No," I said. "That's not possible." The older woman shrugged, but there was no indifference in it. Only a tired knowledge. "Possible is whatever white folks need it to be." The words hit like a slap. I had heard people speak about white folks before, of course, but always at a distance, as if it were a category that did not include me, because it didn't need to be named. Now in this cell, it sounded like a verdict. I sat down hard on the straw, as if my legs were no longer interested in supporting my pride. The younger woman watched me with an expression that held equal parts contempt and something like pity. "What's your name?" I asked, because it felt safer to grasp at something concrete. She hesitated. "Annis," she said finally. The older woman nodded toward herself. "Prue." Annis's eyes flicked to my pearls again. "You come from a big house. Yes, I said, because denial felt useless. Had you a maid? She asked. I thought of Odette. Matilda. Yes. Annis's jaw tightened. Did you ever look at her and wonder how she got born into your service? I opened my mouth, then closed it. The question was not accusing in the way I expected. It was surgical, cutting straight to what I had never permitted myself to examine. Prue leaned back against the wall. They're going to sell you if the court says so, she said bluntly. I stared at her. They can't sell me. Annis's laugh this time was sharper. They can sell anybody, she said. That's the point. Hours passed in a blur of waiting. I listened to footsteps outside, to distant voices, to a man coughing like he'd been doing it for years. I tried to assemble logic the way my father taught me to assemble music, measure by measure. If there was a petition, there had to be a hearing. If there was evidence, it could be disputed. If there was law, surely it protected. But even as I thought it, I felt the hollowness. The law had always protected someone. It just might not be me. Near dusk, the door opened. A clerk stood there with a ledger book tucked under his arm. No, not ledger, not that. He held a slim packet of papers tied with string. A man followed behind him, tall, well-dressed, with a face I recognized even as my stomach sank. Edmund Leroux, my father's nephew, my mother's polite enemy. The man who had been at every supper since my father's illness began, offering help with accounts, offering comfort with a smile that never reached his eyes. He stepped into the cell as if it belonged to him. Mary Ann, he said softly, like we were in the parlor and not in a cage. This is regrettable. My hands curled into fists around the chain. You did this. His expression barely changed. I did what duty required. What duty? I hissed. He glanced at Prue and Annis. Privacy, he told the deputy. The deputy reached for the older women. Prue stiffened. Annis drew back, fear flashing. No, I snapped, surprising myself. They stay. Edmund's eyes flicked to mine. For a moment, the politeness slipped. Something colder surfaced. They are not your concern anymore, he said. The deputy dragged Prue and Annis out anyway. Their chains scraped against stone. Annis's gaze locked on mine as she was pulled away, and in it I saw a warning I didn't yet understand. Then it was just Edmund and me, separated by bars. He held up the packet. Your father's estate is in disorder, he said. Debts are substantial. Creditors are circling. I don't care, I spat. Get me out of here. Edmund sighed as if I were childish. You are 16. You were not formally presented as heir in the way your father intended. And now there's complication. Complication, I repeated, voice shaking. You mean lies? He tilted his head. Do you truly not know? My silence was answer enough. Edmund's gaze traveled over my face, my cheekbones, my mouth, my hair, evaluating like a buyer. He reached into the packet and removed a folded paper. He held it up just beyond the bars, close enough that I could see the ink but not touch it. A baptism record. The church's careful script. A name I recognized, not as mine, but as one of the women my mother rarely spoke of, Lark Baptiste. Under it, another line. Child Marie-Louise, female. Born of Lark Baptiste, enslaved, property of... My vision blurred. I blinked hard. What is this? I whispered. Edmund's voice was almost gentle. A truth your mother buried. No, I said, but my body had gone cold. My mother is Celeste Duval. Edmund's smile was thin. Celeste Duval raised you. That is not the same. My lungs refused to fill properly. Where did you... From the church, he said. And from witnesses. Who? I demanded. He shrugged. The midwife is dead, but there were others. Women in the quarters, a priest who took confession, people who remember what your mother tried to erase. I gripped the bars until my fingers hurt. Even if that record exists, it proves nothing. It could be anyone. Edmund's eyes narrowed. Your mother kept you away from sun. She insisted on powder and gloves. She refused to have you examined by a physician after your fever at 10. Why, do you suppose? I remembered that fever, the delirium, my mother hovering, frantic, refusing the doctor's touch. I remembered how she had snatched my hand back from a man in town who had commented on the color of my skin in summer. At the time, I thought she was merely protective. Now, protection had a different shape. You're lying, I said, but my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Edmund leaned closer. Under Louisiana law, he said quietly, the condition of the child follows the condition of the mother. I swallowed, throat burning. My mother is free. Lark Baptiste is not, Edmund said, and never was. The words landed with a weight that made the cell tilt. You can't, I said, not to Edmund, not to the court, just to the universe. You can't take my life, and Edmund's gaze hardened fully now. Your life, he corrected, was borrowed. I flinched as if struck. He exhaled, like a man dealing with an inconvenient but manageable problem. There will be a hearing, but hearings take time. Creditors do not wait, and the longer you are held, the more rumors spread. I don't care about rumors, I said, desperate. I care about truth. Edmund smiled without warmth. Truth is precisely what is ruining you. He tucked the baptism paper back into the packet. Edmund, I whispered, and I hated myself for how small my voice sounded. Why are you doing this? You were my family. He studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how honest to be. Because your father was weak, he said at last. He let your mother run the house like a theater, and everyone else like puppets. He let debts grow. He let... Edmund's jaw tightened. He let you exist. My stomach twisted. He loved me. Perhaps, Edmund said. Or perhaps he loved the lie your mother sold him. I stared at him, hearing my mother's voice on the steps, desperate. No matter what they say, no matter what they call you. Edmund straightened. You will be transferred tomorrow to the parish holding house. If the court rules as expected, you will be auctioned to satisfy the estate. Auctioned. The word finally pierced through disbelief into pure terror. No, I said, hoarse. No, my mother will stop you. Edmund's eyes flickered. Your mother is compromised. What does that mean? I demanded. But Edmund was already turning away. Happy birthday, Marianne, he said over his shoulder, and left me there with the iron and the truth and the sound of my own heartbeat trying to outrun what was coming. That night I did not sleep. I sat in the corner of the cell as darkness thickened, listening to the building settle around me. I tried to picture my mother at Cypress Saint, running, shouting, summoning lawyers, pulling strings. I tried to picture her walking into the courthouse with her chin lifted, her voice sharp enough to cut through men. But the image kept fracturing because I could not forget the look on her face in the blue room. Guilt. If she had hidden something, then even her power had limits. Even her love had seams. Near midnight, Prue and Annis were pushed back into the cell. Prue's face was set, angry. Annis's eyes were swollen again, as if she'd been crying. They sank down beside me. Prue looked at my wrists. They told you, she said. I nodded, throat tight. Annis studied me. So, she said quietly, you know what you are to them now. What I am, I echoed. Annis's gaze held mine. A girl they can sell. I wrapped my arms around myself as if I could contain the shattering. Prue let out a breath. I seen this before, she said. Not with silk, maybe. But with people thinking they safe. Then somebody need money. Somebody want revenge. Somebody find a law to make it clean. My voice trembled. How do I stop it? Annis laughed, but there was no humor. Stop it, she said. You don't stop it. You survive it. Her words made something harden in my chest. I stared at her. How? Annis's eyes flicked to the bars, then back. She lowered her voice. Listen, she said. You still got something. You got knowledge. You got words. I have nothing, I whispered. You got a face folks recognize, Annis said. That can be a weapon. A scandal can be a weapon. I swallowed. Scandal? Prue shifted. Your mama, she said slowly. She been hiding something all these years. Folks don't like being fooled, but they also don't like a lady getting shamed in public. If you make enough noise, maybe you make somebody hesitate. Hesitate long enough for what? I asked. Annis's eyes were fierce. Long enough for a door to open, she said. Long enough for someone to slip you a knife. You look at me like I'm wicked. I'm just practical. I stared at her, realizing in a sick, dizzy way that she spoke like someone who had rehearsed survival 100 times. Why are you helping me? I asked, suspicion threading through fear. You don't owe me anything. Annis's jaw clenched. No, she said. I don't. Then softer. But I know what it is to watch your life get decided by men in coats. Prue's gaze softened a fraction. And, she added, maybe you ain't just you in this story. Maybe you part of all of us. I didn't understand then. Not fully. But the next morning, when they chained my ankles and marched me through town like a lesson, I began to. The holding house was worse than the courthouse cell. It was a low building behind a tavern, where human beings were stacked like barrels until sale. The air was thick with sweat and fear. The floor was dirt, packed hard by too many feet. A man with a whip sat on a stool, chewing something. Watching, they took my pearls. They took my silk. They gave me a plain dress that smelled like old soap and someone else's despair. They wrapped my hair in a rag. When I protested, the man laughed. Ain't no use looking fancy now, he said. Your inventory. Inventory. I felt myself detach from my body, watching from somewhere above as if I were a stranger. A girl. A thing. They shoved me into a corner with other women. Some stared at me openly. Some turned away, resentful of my clean skin, my uncalloused hands. A few looked at my face with a strange recognition, like they'd seen me from a distance at Cypress Saint, on the gallery, in the carriage, safe, behind whiteness. Now I was on their side of the bars, or almost, because even here I felt the privilege clinging like a ghost. My posture, my speech, my assumption that someone would come. The first buyer who came to look at us did not even pretend to see us as people. He walked along the line, lifting chins with 2 fingers, prodding arms, asking questions about teeth and hips as if shopping for livestock. When he reached me, he paused. His eyes narrowed. Well, he said slowly, and his voice had a smile in it. Ain't you a surprise? I held his gaze, forcing my chin up. Don't touch me, he laughed. Listen to her, he said to the trader. She talked like she still got a parlor. The trader, Mr. Sorrel, I heard someone call him, shrugged. Special case, he said. Court matter. Might fetch high. Might fetch trouble. The buyer leaned closer, his breath sour. What you called? He asked me. I swallowed. Marianne. He rolled the name around like a candy. Marianne, he repeated, and then quietly, you know what they say about you? I didn't answer. He smiled wider. They say you were born in chains and didn't know it. He let his gaze drop to my mouth. They say you've been sleeping in a bed that never belonged to you. I felt nausea rise. Leave me alone. The trader laughed. She got spirit, he said. Spirit sells. The buyer's hand lifted, and for a moment I thought he would touch my cheek. Instead, he reached into my hair rag, tugged slightly, exposing the skin near my ear. His fingers lingered too long. My stomach turned. I jerked away. He chuckled. Yee, he murmured. You'll do. He walked on. I sat trembling, fury and shame tangling, until I couldn't tell them apart. That was the day I learned the second lesson. When your status is questioned, your body becomes public property, measured, discussed, evaluated. And the third lesson came soon after. Even if you scream, The walls will not care. Because no one screamed louder than the woman in the corner who had just learned her child had been sold south the week before. Her grief filled the holding house like smoke, and still the trader ate his lunch. Late that afternoon, a familiar voice cut through the murmur. "Where is she?" I jerked my head up. My mother stood at the doorway, not the composed Celeste Duval who hosted dinners and corrected posture. This woman looked like she had been dragged through thorns. Her hair was loose, her eyes red-rimmed, her dress wrinkled as if she had not slept, but her chin was lifted, and her gaze burned with something sharp enough to be dangerous. The trader rose, surprised. "Madame Duval," he said, polite and wary, "this is highly irregular." "I don't care what you call irregular," my mother snapped. "Where is my daughter?" Murmurs rippled through the women around me. Heads turned, eyes widened. My mother stepped forward, scanning the line. When her gaze landed on me, something in her face broke and hardened at the same time. "Marianne," she whispered. I surged forward, chains clinking. "Mother!" The trader stepped between us. "Madame, you cannot—" My mother shoved him. Actually shoved him, hands on his chest, pushing him back a step. Gasps erupted. No one expected a lady to touch a man like that. She reached me, her hands cupped my face, trembling. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Oh, God, I'm sorry." I clung to her wrists, because touching her felt like proof I still existed. "Get me out," I begged. "Please. Tell them. Tell them it's a lie." My mother's eyes closed for a moment, as if she were bracing against impact. Then she opened them and said the words I had both needed and feared. "It's not a lie," she whispered. The air went thin. I stared at her, unable to process. "What?" My mother's lips trembled. Her voice came out fractured. "I raised you," she said. "I loved you, but—" She swallowed. "But I did not give birth to you." My entire body went cold. "No," I said, as if refusal could rewrite blood. My mother's grip tightened. "Listen to me," she insisted, urgent. "This is not about what you are. This is about what they want." "What am I?" I whispered, because the question had become a blade in my chest. My mother's eyes filled. "You are mine," she said fiercely. "You are my daughter." "That's not what the law says," the trader interjected, recovering his dignity. "Madame, the court—" My mother whirled on him. "The court can choke on its own ink," she hissed. "I have petitioned. I have retained counsel. I have—" A new voice cut in, smooth as oil. "And you have lied for 16 years. Edmund stepped into the doorway behind her. He looked immaculate, as always. Clean coat, calm eyes. A man who could ruin you without smudging his cuffs. My mother's shoulders went rigid. "You!" she spat. Edmund's gaze slid to me, and the satisfaction there made my skin crawl. "Marianne," he said gently, "I told you. This is regrettable." My mother lunged at him, fury exploding. "You will not take her!" Two men, deputies, caught her arms. She struggled, wild, unladylike, desperate. Edmund did not move. "Madame," he said, voice mild, "your dramatics will not change the law." My mother's eyes burned. "You don't care about law," she snarled. "You care about my humiliation. You care about my ruin." Edmund's smile thinned. "Your ruin is simply efficient." My mother's breath hitched. Edmund stepped closer to the bars, addressing me as if we were at tea. "The hearing is scheduled," he said. "But until then, you are held as property in dispute." I gripped the bars so hard my fingers ached. "You can't do this," I whispered. "You knew me. You ate at our table." Edmund's eyes flickered, and for a moment I saw something. Resentment, maybe envy. "Yes," he said softly. "I did. And I watched you inherit everything while my uncle's bloodline was diluted." Diluted. The word was poison. My mother twisted against the deputies. "You hateful little snake," she hissed. "You would burn the house down just to watch me choke on smoke." Edmund's gaze turned cold. "Madame," he said, "you burned it the moment you stole another woman's child and called her yours." The holding house went silent. Women stared at my mother. Men stared. Even the traitor stopped chewing. My mother's face drained. She stopped struggling. I stared at her, nausea rising. "Stole?" I whispered. My mother's eyes met mine, raw, shattered. "I saved you," she whispered. Edmund's voice was calm, deadly. "From what?" he asked. "From being what you were born as, or from being evidence of your husband's sins?" My mother flinched like struck. Edmund leaned closer to me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Your father did not want you sold," he said. "He wanted you hidden. He wanted you convenient. But he died before he could make the lie permanent." I trembled. "My father? He knew." Edmund's gaze held mine. "Of course he knew," he said softly. "Men always know. They just choose when it matters." My vision blurred. My mother made a sound, half sob, half snarl. "Mary Ann," she pleaded, "don't listen to him. He wants to break you." But Edmund had already done it, because the truth wasn't just that I might have been born to an enslaved woman. The truth was that I had been raised in the very house that enslaved her, that the woman who called herself my mother had built my life on another woman's stolen pain. And the truth sold me into chains, not because it was true, but because it was useful. Edmund straightened. "Take her home," he told the deputies, nodding at my mother, "before she embarrasses herself further." My mother fought weakly. "No," she whispered. "No, no, please." The men dragged her toward the door. She twisted, reaching for me one last time through the air and iron. "Mary Ann," she cried, "you must remember, you are not what they say. You are—" The door slammed. Silence fell like a curtain. I sank to the dirt floor, shaking. Around me, women whispered. Some looked at me with a new kind of expression, something like grim recognition. Others looked satisfied, as if seeing a lady brought low was its own small justice. Annis, who had been returned to the holding house with Prue, watched me from across the room, her face unreadable. When the traitor walked past, I heard him mutter, "Worth a fortune, that scandal." And I understood then. My life was now a commodity twice over. They would sell me for what I was, and they would sell me for what my story could entertain. The hearing came 3 days later. They did not bring me into the courtroom with dignity. They marched me in, chained, past benches full of townsfolk hungry for spectacle. I had been a girl admired in church, a young lady nodded at on Sundays. Now I was an exhibit. Whispers followed me like flies. "That's her. She's the Duval girl. They say she's—" "No, look at her. She looks white. They say her mother was a seamstress in the quarters. They say Madame Duval stole her. She lived like a queen. Now look." The judge sat high, bored, as if deciding a parcel's boundary. Edmund stood at one table with a lawyer who looked eager. My mother stood at the other with a lawyer who looked tired but stubborn. Her eyes found mine immediately. I wanted to run to her. But chains make distance a law. The judge called the case. Edmund's lawyer spoke first, smooth, confident. He presented the baptism record. He called witnesses. An old man who said he had once heard the priest mutter about Madame's miracle baby, a woman from the quarters, her head lowered, who testified that she had seen Lark Baptiste pregnant, had seen her vanish from the cabins for days, had seen Madame Duval appear with a newborn soon after. My mother's lawyer objected, arguing hearsay, unreliable testimony, motive. He argued that I had been raised as legitimate, baptized under the Duval name, presented in society, educated. He argued that to strip me now would be monstrous. Edmund's lawyer smiled. "The law does not consult sentiment," he said. My mother's lawyer called my mother to the stand. When Celeste Duval stood, the courtroom leaned forward. People loved a fallen lady almost as much as they loved a righteous one. My mother lifted her chin and swore the oath. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "Yes," she said, when asked if I was hers. "She is my daughter. in every way that matters. Edmund's lawyer leaned in, polite poison. Madame, did you give birth to the girl called Marianne Duval? My mother's throat moved. Her eyes flicked to me. In that gaze I saw 1,000 choices she had made. To love, to lie, to protect, to possess. She swallowed. No, she said, and the word fell like a stone. I did not. A murmur surged through the room. Edmund's lawyer smiled faintly. Then whose child is she? My mother's face tightened. She is Lark Baptiste's child, she said, voice breaking, and I took her. There it was. Not rumor, not whisper, confession. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge hammered his gavel lazily. Edmund's lawyer pressed. You stole an enslaved woman's child. My mother's eyes flashed. I saved her, she snapped. Saved her from her rightful condition, he asked. My mother's voice went hoarse. Saved her from being sold, she said. From being used. From being... She stopped, jaw clenched, because certain truths were not spoken aloud in polite courtrooms, even though everyone knew them. The lawyer's eyes gleamed. From being what enslaved girls often become. My mother's face went white. The courtroom went too quiet. I felt heat rise in my face, shame and terror tangled. I understood what he meant. I had heard whispers, seen men's eyes, ignored what I did not want to know. My mother lifted her chin higher, furious at the implication and furious that it was not entirely false. Yes, she said. From that. The judge cleared his throat, uncomfortable. We are not here to discuss moral hypotheticals, he said. We are here to determine status. Status. My mother's lawyer tried. He argued that my father had intended to secure my freedom. He produced letters, evidence of my father's affection, receipts for tutors, for dresses, for books. He argued implied recognition. Edmund's lawyer countered with the brutal simplicity of statute. The condition follows the mother. Baptism record. Confession. Debt. I watched the judge's eyes drift, bored. I watched him decide my life the way a man decides the weather is unpleasant, with mild inconvenience, no responsibility. Finally, he spoke. Given the evidence presented, he said, and the confession of Madame Duval, the court finds that the girl known as Marianne Duval is, by maternal lineage, enslaved. The words did not feel real. Enslaved. A sound like a door locking forever. My mother made a strangled noise. She surged forward, but her lawyer held her back. No, she whispered, broken. No, please. The judge lifted a hand, irritated. However, he continued, given her upbringing and the unusual circumstances, the court will permit Madame Duval to bid at public auction should she wish to purchase the girl's freedom, contingent upon settlement of the estate's debts. Purchase. Bid. As if my life were a piece of furniture being reclaimed. Edmund's mouth curved slightly. My mother's face crumpled, then hardened. She turned toward me, eyes blazing through tears. I will get you, she mouthed. I wanted to believe her. But belief was becoming a luxury. They led me out of court not as Marianne Duval, but as property to be sold. Outside the sun was bright, cruelly ordinary. The auction was set for Saturday. They kept me in the holding house because now there was no dispute. Only sale. Word spread fast, not just through the parish, but through New Orleans society like wildfire. A girl raised as a mistress, revealed as enslaved. A lady's scandal. A dead planter's hypocrisy. An estate crumbling. People came to the holding house the way they came to see exotic animals. They came to gape at the girl who had worn pearls and now wore iron. Some came out of curiosity, some out of greed, some out of cruelty. One woman, white, dressed in lavender, stood at the door and stared at me with a tight mouth. "Do you remember me?" she asked. I searched her face and recognized her vaguely from dinners at Cypress Saint, a neighbor's wife. "Yes," I said cautiously. She smiled thinly. I remember you too, she said. You once told my maid she should smile more. You were 10, I believe. Heat flushed through me. I had no memory of it, but I could imagine it, my childish assumption that smiles were owed to me. The woman's eyes glittered. Well, she said softly, smile now. She left. After she was gone, I sat shaking, not because of her words, but because of the sudden, horrifying clarity that I could not undo what I had been. Even if I escaped chains, I could not escape the person I had been while others wore them. Prue sat beside me one night, her voice low. You see it now, she said. I swallowed. I didn't know, I whispered. Prue's gaze was tired. Some folks don't know because they don't want to, she said. Some folks don't know because nobody let them. Either way, the world still turn. Annis, listening, said quietly, knowing don't save you. Doing might. What can I do? I asked, desperate. Annis's eyes held mine. Survive, she said again. Then decide what you're going to be. Saturday arrived like an execution date. They washed me, not kindly, like polishing merchandise. They rubbed my skin with lye soap until it burned. They combed my hair hard. They made me stand in a plain dress that fit poorly because they wanted me recognizable, but not dignified. The traitor, Mr. Sorrel, tapped my chin with 2 fingers. Look forward, he ordered. Let him see you. I wanted to bite his hand, but I did not. Because I had learned that rebellion without leverage is just pain. They marched me onto the auction block in town. A crowd had gathered. Men in coats, women with parasols, boys perched on barrels. The air smelled of sweat, cigar smoke, and excitement. I spotted my mother immediately. She stood near the front, dressed in black, her face carved into a mask. Beside her, her lawyer held papers. Behind her, 2 servants from Cypress Saint stood rigid, Odette among them, eyes fixed on me like she was holding me in place with sheer will. Edmund stood on the other side of the crowd, hands clasped behind his back, looking like a man attending a performance he had paid for. The auctioneer began with other people first, men, women, children, names called, prices shouted, lives assigned with a hammer. Each strike of the gavel made my stomach knot tighter. Then the auctioneer called, special lot. The crowd shifted. Heads turned toward the steps. Mr. Sorrel pushed me forward. Here we have, the auctioneer announced loudly, voice bright, a prime young female, 16 years of age, raised in the house, trained in fine service. A euphemism that made bile rise in my throat. And, he continued, eyes gleaming, a most unusual circumstance. As you all have heard, murmurs, hungry. Bidding starts at 800. A hand shot up. 9. Another. 10. My mother raised her hand. 12. The crowd hissed softly. Admiration, gossip. A man near Edmund raised his hand. 13. My mother's jaw tightened. 15. The numbers climbed. Each bid felt like a knife slicing another piece of me away. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. People valuing me, claiming me, enjoying the contest. My mother's face remained rigid, but her eyes were frantic. 18! 20! My mother lifted her hand again. 22! A pause. The crowd murmured. Then Edmund raised his hand calmly. 25. The world tilted. My mother's head snapped toward him. She stopped herself because the crowd was watching. Edmund's eyes met hers with cool satisfaction. My mother lifted her hand, voice sharp. 26. Edmund didn't blink. 28. My mother's breath hitched. I saw her hands tremble. Her lawyer leaned in, urgent. Madame, the creditors. My mother ignored him. 30. A gasp rippled through the crowd. $300 for a girl, scandal included. Edmund's mouth curved. 32, he said softly. My mother's face went white. For a heartbeat, the crowd waited, breath held like a theater audience. My mother lifted her hand. Then it faltered. Not because she didn't want me, because she could not. I saw it in her eyes. The walls closing, the estate's debts. the limits of her power, the truth of the world she had built on possession, now eating her alive. The auctioneer's voice rang out. 3,200 going once. My mother's lips parted, trembling. Going twice. Odette's hands clenched. Tears shone in her eyes. My mother's hand rose again, halfway. Then her lawyer grabbed her wrist. Madame, he hissed, you will ruin yourself. My mother's eyes blazed with fury. I already am ruined, she whispered. But the hand still did not lift high enough. The auctioneer grinned. Sold! The gavel slammed. Sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. Edmund LaRue had bought me. A roar of whispers exploded. People leaned, hungry to see my reaction. My mother made a sound that wasn't human. She lunged forward, but men held her back. Scandal be damned. Edmund stepped closer to the block, looking up at me as if I were a painting he had finally acquired. Well, he said softly, now we can put things in their proper place. My knees went weak. I stared at him, horror and rage colliding. You can't, I whispered. Edmund's eyes were calm. I can, he said. I just did. The traitor grabbed my arm, pulling me down from the block. The crowd parted, buzzing. My mother fought against the hands restraining her, tears streaking her face now, dignity shattered. Marianne, she cried, voice ragged. Marianne, listen to me. I twisted toward her, desperate. She reached out, fingers stretched toward me through bodies and air and law. I will find you, she screamed. I swear it. I will. Edmund's voice cut in cold. Take her away. Men closed around me. As they dragged me through the crowd, I caught Odette's gaze again. Odette's lips moved, barely visible. 3 words, not to comfort me, to arm me. He lies too. Then I was shoved into a carriage. Again not mine, and the door slammed, plunging me into darkness. The carriage smelled of leather and something faintly metallic. The windows were curtained. I could not see the town, the people, the sky. Just the cage. Across from me, Edmund sat calmly as if we were traveling to a dinner party. I stared at him, shaking. Why? I demanded. Why buy me? If you wanted money, you could have... Edmund's eyes flicked up. Sold you to someone else? He finished. Yes, I could have. Then why? He leaned back, folding his gloves neatly. Because I do not trust strangers with my family's mess. I recoiled at the word family. I am not your family. Edmund's gaze sharpened. You are a stain on it, he said. And stains must be managed. I clenched my fists. You're doing this to punish my mother. Edmund's mouth tightened. Your mother, he said, played a dangerous game. She thought she could steal from the quarters and still be a saint in the parlor. She thought she could humiliate my uncle by keeping his sin under her roof and calling it love. He leaned forward slightly. She made a fool of all of us. I swallowed hard. So, you destroy me to hurt her? Edmund's eyes held mine. Destroy? He repeated, amused. No, Marianne, I am simply putting you where the law says you belong. My stomach twisted. You are sick. Edmund's gaze went colder. You will address me as Master LaRue now, he said softly. The word master struck like a whip without touch. I shook with fury. No. Edmund watched me for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. We shall see, he said. The carriage rolled on. I tried to think. Fast, sharp, desperate. Escape? The door was locked. The driver likely armed. Scream? No one would help. Appeal? Edmund enjoyed this too much. Then I remembered Odette's words. He lies too. He lies too. About what? About motive, about law, about my father, about my mother. And then another thought surfaced, a small, dangerous ember. Scandal can be a weapon. If Edmund wanted to manage the stain, he needed silence. He needed me quiet. He needed the story controlled, which meant my voice, my knowledge, still mattered. We arrived at Edmund's property at dusk. Not Cypress Saint, not the grand house with columns and chandeliers. Edmund's estate was smaller, meaner, built more for profit than show. The sugar fields stretched wide, the air sweet and rotten with molasses. They dragged me out, and as my feet hit the dirt, I saw faces turn toward me. Enslaved people pausing in their work, watching. Some had heard the story already. Some simply watched the new girl arrive. A woman stood near the steps of the main house, arms crossed, white, young, pretty, in the sharp, hard way of someone raised to never soften. Edmund approached her, touching her elbow. "Clara," he said, "this is Mary Ann." The woman's eyes swept over me, my face, my ragged dress, my wrists. Her mouth curved. "So," she said slowly, "she's real." I stared, confused. Clara's smile widened. "I told you," she said to Edmund, "that your aunt was hiding something rotten." My throat tightened. "Who are you?" I demanded. Clara's eyes glittered. "I'm your cousin," she said sweetly. "Or perhaps not. Family is flexible, isn't it?" Edmund's hand tightened on her elbow. "Enough," he murmured. Clara stepped closer to me. "Do you know what I want?" she asked softly. "I want to see the look on Madame Duval's face when she realizes her daughter is scrubbing my floors." I swallowed, rage burning. "You think you're better than me?" Clara's smile faded into something sharper. "Better?" she repeated. "Oh, Mary Ann, I'm lawful." She leaned in, voice a whisper. "And now you are not. That night they put me in a cabin behind the main house. Not with the field hands, not with the house servants, alone. A strategy. Isolation makes people obedient faster. The cabin was small, a narrow cot, a bucket, a thin blanket, a barred window high up. I sat on the cot, shaking, listening to the night sounds. Insects, distant voices, the creak of wood. My wrists ached from the iron. I thought of my birthday morning, the pearls, the mirror, the silk. It felt like a dream someone else had told me. I pressed my hands to my face, and for a moment I thought I might dissolve into nothing. Then a soft sound came at the door. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. A pattern, deliberate. I froze. The latch lifted slightly. The door opened a crack. A face appeared. Odette. My breath caught so hard it hurt. "Odette." "Shh," she whispered, slipping inside quickly. She wore a cloak, her hair hidden. She looked like a shadow that had learned to walk. "How—" I began. Odette grabbed my hands, eyes fierce. "Your mother sent me," she whispered. "She sent me with money, with papers, with—" I clung to her. "Get me out." Odette's throat worked. "I can't," she whispered. "Not tonight. There's patrols. Edmund's watching. But I can bring things." "Things?" I repeated, dizzy. Odette reached into her cloak and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. A book. Not any book. My father's old hymnal. The one he used to hum from when he was drunk and sentimental. The one with a cracked leather cover. Odette pressed it into my hands. "Inside," she whispered, "there's a letter." My fingers trembled as I opened it. The pages smelled like home. A folded paper slid out. My mother's handwriting. "Mary Ann, I cannot reach you with law alone. Edmund has allies. The court has turned its face. But I am not finished. You must listen to Odette and do exactly as she says. There are truths Edmund fears more than he craves revenge. Your father left something. Something he hid from Edmund. I am searching. Until then, survive. No matter what they call you, do not surrender your mind. They can chain your wrists, but not your memory. I love you. I am sorry. I am coming." Celeste's tears blurred the ink. Odette grabbed my shoulders. "Listen," she whispered urgently. "Edmund lies. He did not buy you just to punish. He bought you because he's afraid of what you know." "What do I know?" I whispered. Odette's eyes flicked toward the door. "Your father," she said, voice shaking, "left a sealed packet in the church wall." My breath caught. "What?" Odette nodded. "I heard him tell the priest once. He said if anything happened, if Edmund tried to take everything, there was proof." "Proof of what?" I demanded. Odette swallowed. "Proof that Edmund isn't the rightful heir." The air went thin. Odette leaned closer. "They say Edmund's father died when Edmund was small," she whispered. "But there was talk. Madame Duval once said Edmund wasn't his father's son at all." A scandal within scandal. My mind raced. If that's true, it would ruin him, Odette whispered, and he knows it. That's why he needs you quiet. If you start asking questions, if you start speaking to the right people, he loses control. Hope flared, sharp and dangerous. What do I do? I whispered. Odette pressed her forehead against mine for a heartbeat. Live, she said. Watch, listen. Learn who in this house hates Edmund. Learn who fears Clara. Learn who might help. Her eyes burned. And Marianne, you must learn what it means to be what they call you now, not because you deserve it, because it's real, and you cannot fight what you refuse to see. I nodded, swallowing sobs. Odette slipped back toward the door. I'll return, she whispered, when I can. The door closed softly. I sat in the dark, holding my father's hymnal like it was a lifeline. Outside, the plantation continued to breathe. Inside, I began to plan. The next weeks were a lesson carved into my bones. They put me to work in the big house under Clara's gaze. She made sure I did every task she considered beneath her, scrubbing floors, carrying water, polishing silver until my fingers cracked. She enjoyed watching me learn. You missed a spot, she would say, voice sweet, and when I looked, there was no spot, just her need to see me kneel again. When I spoke too formally, she mocked my accent. When I spoke too plainly, she laughed at my desperation to fit. Edmund watched from a distance, rarely intervening. He let Clara be the whip, the humiliation. But sometimes he summoned me to his office. He would sit behind his desk like a judge, papers neatly stacked, and he would make me stand. How are you adapting? He would ask mildly. I would keep my face blank. I work. Edmund's eyes would flick to my hands, now redder, rougher. Good, he would say softly, almost pleased. You see? Life is simpler when you accept your place. I hated him with a fury that kept me upright. But hate alone didn't open doors. So I did what Odette said. I watched. I listened. And I learned that Edmund's house was full of fault lines. Clara hated him in the way a woman hates the man who controls her world. She was Edmund's wife. Yes, wife, newly married, chosen for her family's connections and her cold ambition. She played the lady, but her eyes were always calculating. She wanted power. Edmund gave her enough to make her loyal, but not enough to satisfy her. Their marriage was not love. It was a contract with teeth. The overseer, Mr. Grady, feared Edmund because Edmund held his debts. Grady drank. Grady talked when he drank. The housekeeper, an older enslaved woman named Mavis, had served Edmund's mother and did not like him. She moved through the house with silent contempt. And in the quarters, there were whispers of Lark Baptiste, my birth mother, like a ghost story. She was pretty, someone murmured one night when they thought I couldn't hear. Pretty enough to make trouble. They say Madame Duval stole her baby. They say Lark went mad after. They say she ran. They say Edmund sold her south. Each rumor was a blade. I collected them anyway, because in a world built on lies, rumors were often the only map. One evening, Clara summoned me to her room. She sat at her vanity, brushing her hair slowly, watching me through the mirror. Marianne, she said, voice casual, do you know what people in town are saying? I kept my eyes lowered. No, ma'am, Clara smiled. They're saying Celeste Duval is losing her mind. They say she's begging priests, begging judges, begging anyone with influence. She tilted her head. They say she is even visiting the quarters. My stomach clenched. Why would she? Clara's smile widened. To find your real mother, she whispered. My breath caught. I forced my voice steady. My mother is Celeste. Clara laughed softly. That's what you called her, she said. Not what she is. She leaned forward, eyes glittering. Would you like to know something? She asked. Edmund didn't just buy you to punish Celeste. I stayed silent, heart pounding. Clara's voice dropped. He bought you because he's afraid, she whispered. He thinks you know where your father hid his confession. My pulse spiked. Clara watched my face closely. Ah, she murmured, satisfied. So, you do know something. I forced my expression blank. I know nothing. Clara's smile sharpened. Then you have nothing to bargain with, she said. And that makes you expendable. She set down her brush. Edmund likes to pretend he is merciful, she continued, but he is not. When he grows tired of you, when this scandal becomes old, he will sell you somewhere far enough that no one remembers you were ever Marianne Duval. Cold terror crawled up my spine. Clara stood, smoothing her dress. So, she said lightly, I suggest you make yourself useful to me. I swallowed. How? Clara walked closer until I could smell her perfume. Tell me what you know, she whispered. Tell me what your father hid. Tell me how to ruin Edmund. Her eyes gleamed. And perhaps I will convince him to keep you in the house, where you are safer. Safer. The word was laughable coming from her mouth. I met her gaze carefully. Why would you want to ruin him? Clara's smile faltered for a fraction, revealing something raw underneath, anger, humiliation. Because, she whispered, he thinks he owns me too. Then she stepped back, mask returning. Think about it, she said, and dismissed me with a flick of her hand. That night I lay on my cot in the cabin, staring at the barred window. Clara wanted the packet. Edmund feared it. My mother searched for it, and somewhere behind all this was the truth of my father, what he knew, what he hid, what he intended. I had never thought of my father as a man capable of secret mercy. He had been affectionate in public, distant in private. He had patted my head, praised my piano, scolded my posture. But he had also owned people. He had also ignored cries from the quarters when it was inconvenient. If he had hidden something, was it to save me, or to save himself? I opened the hymnal Odette had given me and traced the notes on a page, remembering how music could carry meaning without words. Then I did something I had never done in my life. I prayed. Not for God to fix the world, but for my mind to stay sharp inside it. The opportunity came unexpectedly, like most dangerous chances do. A month after the auction, Edmund hosted a dinner for influential men, planters, a judge's cousin, a merchant from New Orleans. Clara wanted to impress them. Edmund wanted alliances. They brought extra servants into the house to manage it all. And among them, I saw a face I recognized from Cypress Saint's quarters. Annis. My breath caught. Annis stood near the kitchen doorway, her eyes lowered, carrying trays as if she had always belonged here. But when her gaze flicked up and met mine, there was a flash. Quick, deliberate. She had been sold to Edmund too, not by accident, not by court, by Edmund's design. He was collecting pieces of my old life like trophies. Later, when the house buzzed with dinner preparations, Annis managed to brush past me in the corridor. Her fingers slipped something into my palm, a strip of cloth, tiny, folded. I hid it in my sleeve until I could be alone. Then I unfolded it. 3 words, stitched in small, careful thread. Lark lives. Church. My heart hammered so hard I tasted blood. Lark lives. My birth mother. Alive. And the church. Our church. The one that held the baptism record. The one with hidden walls and sealed packets. My mind raced. If Lark lived, she was not just a rumor. She was a witness. A witness could destroy Edmund. A witness could shift law's cold certainty into scandal's heat. But a witness could also be silenced. I could not wait for my mother anymore. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I had learned that rescue is often just another word for delay. That night, while Edmund drank with his guests, and Clara smiled too hard, I slipped out. Not boldly, not dramatically, like a shadow, like Odette had taught me. The cabins were guarded loosely. The overseer assumed the enslaved would not run during a dinner, not with patrols and dogs and punishment waiting. He underestimated desperation. He underestimated the power of a girl, with a scandal wrapped around her like armor. I moved through the dark, behind the smokehouse, behind the slave quarters, keeping to shadow. A hand grabbed my wrist, suddenly, making me jolt. Mavis, the housekeeper, stood there, eyes sharp. "Where you think you going?" she whispered. I froze, heart pounding. Mavis studied my face for a moment, and I saw something there. Memory, perhaps, of the little girl in lace who once trailed her mother through the kitchen. Then Mavis's mouth tightened. "You looking for answers," she said quietly. I swallowed. "I need to go to the church." Mavis's eyes flicked toward the main house. "Edmund keep keys to everything," she murmured. "Even God's doors." I held her gaze. "Do you want him to win?" Mavis's jaw clenched. "I've been watching men like him win my whole life," she said. "You think I like it?" She reached into her apron and pulled out something cold and heavy. A key. She pressed it into my hand. "Back door of the church," she whispered. "Go fast. Don't get caught. And if you find what you looking for," her eyes hardened, "don't waste it." I nodded, throat tight. Mavis stepped aside, melting back into shadow. I ran. The church stood at the edge of the property, white and quiet. A place where my childhood had been filled with hymns and polite nods. Now it looked different. Smaller, more fragile, like a lie wearing holy paint. The key turned in the back door lock with a soft click. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood. Moonlight filtered through narrow windows, striping the pews. I moved down the aisle, footsteps silent on worn boards. Behind the altar, there was a small storage room where the priest kept supplies. Odette had said my father hid something in the wall. Annis had said Lark lived, and the church was connected. I searched for loose boards, for cracks, for signs. My hands trembled as I felt along the paneling. Then a hollow sound. I pressed again. Hollow. My breath caught. I ran my fingers along the seam until I found a small nail head, slightly newer than the others. I pried at it with shaking hands, using the edge of a candlestick. The panel loosened. Behind it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a packet. My heart slammed against my ribs. I pulled it out, hands slick with sweat, and unwrapped it. Inside, letters, a small velvet pouch, and a folded paper stamped with a seal. Freedom papers. My name was not on them. Lark Baptiste's name was. My vision blurred. The letters were in my father's hand. I recognized it instantly, the slant, the firm strokes. The handwriting of a man who signed bills of sale and wrote polite invitations. I unfolded the first letter. Celeste. If you are reading this, then Edmund has done what I feared he would do. I am not writing this to absolve myself. There is no absolution for what I have done. Lark Baptiste is Marianne's mother. I have kept Lark close because guilt is easier to manage when it is visible. Celeste, you took the child and called her yours. You did it because you could not bear the humiliation of my sin, and because you could not bear to lose what you believed was your rightful place. I allowed it because it preserved my image. I allowed it because it made my sin convenient. I allowed it because, in my cowardice, I thought a child raised in lace would be spared the worst of this world. I was wrong. I have arranged for Lark's freedom. The papers are enclosed. I hid them here because I do not trust the house. I do not trust Edmund. If I had any courage, I would have freed her openly. Instead, I have done it like a thief. If Edmund moves against Marianne, you must use these papers as weapon and shield. The law may chain the child by her mother's condition, but if the mother is free, then the chain breaks. You will say, it is too late. Perhaps. but perhaps you can still pry a door open. And Celeste, if you truly love Marianne, you must tell her the truth fully. Love built on lies becomes a noose. Henri, my father. My hands shook so hard the paper rattled. If Lark was free, legally free, then under the law, I should not be enslaved. But Edmund had used the baptism record to claim Lark was enslaved at my birth. If the freedom papers existed and were dated, if they proved my father had freed her before the court ruling, I scanned the document desperately. The date, my stomach dropped. It was dated 2 years ago. 2 years. Not before my birth. Not before my childhood. Not before the court's logic of partus. But it was still something. Something Edmund did not want the world to know. That my father had tried. Late, cowardly, but tried to free my mother. And if Lark lived, she could testify not only to my birth, but to Henry's intentions. And perhaps to Edmund's lies. Because Edmund had told the court Lark had been sold south. He had told the world she was gone. But Annis had stitched Lark lives. I heard a soft sound behind me. I froze, heart hammering. A whisper in the dark. Marie-Louise? The name hit me like a ghost. Marie-Louise. The baptism name. The name I had never heard spoken aloud to me. I turned slowly. A woman stood in the aisle, between pews, half in shadow, half in moonlight. Her hair was wrapped in a scarf. Her dress was plain. Her posture was wary, like someone trained to expect pain. But her eyes were mine. Not in color. Hers were darker, richer, but in shape. In the way they held fear and defiance in the same breath. My breath caught. "Who are you?" I whispered, even though my whole body already knew. The woman swallowed. "They told me my baby was dead," she said hoarsely. "They told me she didn't breathe." My throat tightened so hard I could barely speak. "Lark?" I whispered. The woman flinched at the name like it was a bruise. Then she stepped closer, and I saw her face fully. She looked older than 16 years would explain. Life had carved its story into her. Her eyes locked on mine. "You look like him," she whispered, and there was hatred in it, and sorrow and something like exhaustion. I trembled. My voice cracked. "I was raised as Celeste's daughter." Lark's mouth twisted. "I know," she said. "I've been hearing about you for years. The girl in lace. The miracle baby. The lady's little angel." Shame burned my face. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I swear I didn't know." Lark studied me for a long moment. Then she laughed. A soft, bitter sound. "Of course you didn't," she said. "That was the point." I stepped forward, drawn by something fierce and aching. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Edmund said you were gone." Lark's eyes narrowed. "Edmund lies," she said simply. My pulse spiked. "He said he had proof I was enslaved because you were enslaved." Lark's gaze went cold. "I was enslaved," she said. Then Henri promised things. Then Madame promised things. Then they all promised, until promises got tired. My throat tightened. "My father, Henri, he left freedom papers for you," I blurted, holding up the document like an offering. Lark stared at it. Her expression flickered. Shock, grief, rage. "He did," she whispered. I swallowed. "They're dated 2 years ago," I said. "Not enough to undo everything, but—" "It's enough to show he knew," Lark said sharply. "Enough to show he tried to clean his conscience when it started stink too loud." She stepped closer, eyes burning. "Why you looking for me?" she demanded. "To save yourself?" The bluntness stung because it was not entirely unfair. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I admitted. "I don't want to be sold. I don't want—" My voice cracked. "But I need truth. I need to know what they did to you. What they did to us." Lark's gaze held mine, searching. Finally she exhaled, shoulders sagging slightly. "You got your daddy's words," she said softly. "Now you need mine." She glanced toward the door, tense. "We ain't safe here long," she murmured. Edmund got eyes everywhere. Fear surged. He knows you're here? Lark's mouth tightened. He suspects, she said. He been hunting me like a dog hunts scent? My skin went cold. Why? Lark's eyes hardened. Because I know what he did, she said. I stared. What did he do? Lark's voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with danger. Edmund's daddy wasn't who they said, she murmured. And Edmund knows it, and your daddy knew it too. The scandal Odette hinted at. My heart hammered. Tell me. Lark's gaze flicked toward the church walls, toward the hidden packet. Henry put something in that wall, she said. Not just my papers. I looked down at the packet in my hands. The velvet pouch. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a signet ring. Not my father's. I recognized it because I had seen Edmund wear a similar ring at dinners, tapping it against his glass. This ring bore a different crest. A crest from a family in New Orleans I had heard whispered about. Wealthy, powerful. My throat tightened. What is this? Lark's voice was low. Proof, she said. Proof Edmund's mama laid with a different man. A man with money. A man who wanted his name kept clean. My stomach churned. If this comes out, Edmund loses everything, Lark said. And that's why he can't let me breathe. I felt dizzy. Then, from outside the church, a sound. Footsteps. Multiple. Quick. Lark's face snapped toward the door. Too late, she whispered. Panic surged. What do we do? Lark grabbed my wrist, her grip strong. You run, she hissed. I can't leave you, I whispered. Lark's eyes burned. You don't got the luxury of pride, she snapped. You want to survive. You use what you got. She shoved the packet into my arms. Take it, she whispered fiercely. Take it to your mama. Take it to town. Make it loud. Footsteps grew louder. A man's voice outside. Search the church. Edmund. My blood turned to ice. Lark pushed me toward the side door. Go, she hissed. Now. I ran. Not gracefully. Not like a lady. Like an animal escaping a trap. I slipped through the side door into the night, heart pounding. Behind me, the church door slammed open. Voices echoed inside. Light the lanterns. Check the pews. My lungs burned. I sprinted through trees, clutching the packet to my chest like it was my heart. Branches snagged my dress. Dirt tore at my shoes. I heard a shout behind me. Stop! Dogs barked. Terror flooded my limbs. I ran harder. I did not know where I was going. Not exactly. Only away. Away from Edmund's hands, away from the church, away from the life I had lived and the chains waiting to tighten. The night swallowed me. Somewhere behind, the barking grew louder, and somewhere inside me, a new voice rose, cold, steady, unfamiliar. Survive, it said. Then decide what you're going to be. I ran until my legs gave out. I collapsed behind a fallen tree in a low, marshy area where the air smelled of mud and rot. I pressed myself into the darkness, shaking, listening. Dogs barked nearby, then farther, then near again. Men's voices shouted. Lantern light flickered through branches like fireflies possessed. I pressed the packet tighter to my chest. The papers crinkled. The ring in the velvet pouch felt heavy as a stone. I thought of Lark inside the church. Had they found her? Had she escaped? Had she been dragged out like I had been, only without silk and pearls to make it scandal? Guilt surged, raw, choking. I had run because she told me to. Because survival demanded it, but the cost of survival was suddenly a weight I could taste. Hours passed, or minutes. Time in fear is warped. Eventually the voices faded. The dogs barking moved away. The lantern light disappeared. Silence returned, thick and damp. I waited longer anyway, because trust was something I could no longer afford. At last, trembling, I crawled out from behind the tree and stumbled through the dark toward the faint glow of town in the distance. I did not go back to Edmund's house. I could not. I headed, barefoot now, toward St. James Parish, toward the place that had condemned me. Because now, I carried a weapon the law did not understand. Proof that Edmund was built on lies, too. Near dawn, I found a small cabin at the edge of a cane field with smoke curling from its chimney. I approached cautiously, heart pounding. A woman opened the door. Her face was wary, eyes sharp. She took one look at me, mud-streaked, shaking, holding papers, and her gaze changed. "You," she whispered. I stared. "Do you know me?" The woman's mouth tightened. "Everybody know you," she said. "You the scandal." I swallowed. "I need help." The woman hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in," she said quickly, "before someone see." Inside, the cabin was small but warm. A pot simmered. 2 children slept on a pallet. The woman grabbed a cloth and shoved it at me. "Wipe your face," she ordered. I obeyed, hands trembling. The woman studied me closely. "You run from Edmund," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Her eyes flicked to the packet in my arms. "What you got?" I swallowed, then opened the hymnal and showed her my father's letter, the freedom papers, the ring. Her eyes widened. "Lord," she whispered. "Can you get a message to Celeste Duval?" I asked urgently. "My mother." The woman's gaze sharpened. "Your mama," she repeated, and there was a complicated bitterness in it. "Celeste Duval ain't never been my mama." I flinched, realizing how the word landed in this room. "I mean," I began, but the woman cut me off with a lifted hand. "I know what you mean," she said tightly. "And I know what you are." She stepped closer, voice low. "You carrying fire," she whispered. "If Edmund finds you, he'll kill you." The word kill landed heavy. Not as melodrama, as fact. My stomach clenched. The woman sighed, rubbing her face. "My name's Sabine," she said. "I work in town. I know people. I know how messages move when they gotta." Hope flickered. Sabine leaned in. "But listen," she whispered. "If you want this to work, you don't just send it to Celeste. You send it to everyone." I stared. "Everyone!" Sabine's eyes were fierce. "Scandal only saves you if it's loud," she said. "You keep it private. Edmund can bury it. You make it public. He got a fight in the open." My heart hammered. Sabine moved quickly, wrapping the packet in oilcloth again. "We go into town," she said. "We going to find the printer. We going to find the priest. We going to find the judge's wife." She looked at me sharply. "You ready to burn down the story they built about you?" I swallowed hard, thinking of my mother in black, reaching for me at the auction, thinking of Lark in the church, thinking of Annis's stitched warning. I nodded. "Yes," I whispered. Sabine's mouth tightened. "Then hold on," she said, "because once you start, there ain't no going back to being Miss Marianne. In town, the morning began like any other. Shops opening, men greeting each other, women buying ribbon, until Sabine's whispered network turned into a storm. By noon, the priest had been summoned. By afternoon, the printer had been bribed. By evening, a handbill circulated like a spark through dry grass. Edmund Leroux, heir or imposter. A dead planter's letter exposes a family lie. A woman hidden for years speaks, if she lives. The handbill did not name me as enslaved. It did not need to. My scandal was already known. What the handbill did was point its finger at Edmund. And once a crowd smells blood, it rarely cares whose it is. Edmund arrived in town before nightfall, furious, riding hard. He stormed into the courthouse, demanding arrests, demanding retractions, demanding control. But control is slippery when rumor has teeth. People gathered outside the courthouse, murmuring, watching, hungry. My mother arrived too, Celeste. Eyes blazing, hair pinned too tightly, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral and an execution at once. When she saw me, standing behind Sabine in a back room of the printer's shop, she made a sound that broke me. "Marianne," she whispered, rushing forward. I braced for her touch, for comfort. But when she reached me, she stopped short, staring at my mud-streaked face, my torn dress, my trembling hands. She looked like she wanted to gather me into her arms, and also like she didn't know if she had the right. "I found it," I whispered, holding out my father's letter. I found the papers. And I found... My voice cracked. I found Lark. My mother's face went paper white. You saw her? She whispered. Yes, I said. In the church. Edmund came. I ran. Shame burned. I don't know if... My mother swayed slightly as if struck. Then she grabbed my shoulders, fierce. You did what you had to, she said, voice shaking. You did what I should have taught you, to survive. Tears blurred my vision. Mother, I whispered. My mother's jaw clenched. No, she corrected, voice raw. Marianne, I do not get to demand that word. Not after what I did. The honesty hit harder than any slap. Sabine cleared her throat, urgent. We ain't got time for grief, she said. Edmund's moving. He'll try to silence the printer. He'll try to... A commotion outside cut her off. Shouting. Footsteps. A man's voice roaring. Where is she? Where's the girl? Edmund. My blood turned to ice. Sabine grabbed my arm. Back door, she hissed. My mother stepped forward, eyes blazing. No, she said sharply. Not this time. She strode toward the front of the shop. I grabbed her sleeve. What are you doing? My mother turned back, and in her eyes I saw something new. Something like a decision carved into bone. I lied for 16 years, she said softly. I will not be silent now. Before I could stop her, she stepped into the front room. Edmund burst in a heartbeat later, face red with fury, eyes wild. When he saw Celeste, he froze. Madame, he spat, you are behind this. Celeste lifted her chin. Yes, she said, I am. Edmund's gaze flicked past her, searching. Where is she? Celeste did not move. You will not touch her again, she said. Edmund laughed, harsh. You think you can protect her. You couldn't protect your own reputation. Celeste's mouth tightened. My reputation can burn, she said. But I will not let you sell my child's life to satisfy your spite. Edmund's eyes narrowed. Your child? He repeated, cruel. Even now you cling to possession. Celeste flinched, but did not back down. Call it what you like, she said. But the papers exist. Henry's letter exists, and the ring exists, and now the town is reading. Edmund's face went white for a fraction, then tightened. You forged it, he snapped. Celeste's eyes glittered. Then why are you afraid? Edmund's jaw worked. Behind him, townsfolk gathered at the door, murmuring. The printer hovered, pale. Edmund's gaze flicked over the crowd. He realized, too late, that this was no longer a private punishment. It was a public fight. He leaned closer to Celeste, lowering his voice. If you continue, he hissed, people will learn what you did. They will know you stole a child. Celeste's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. Let them, she whispered. I deserve their hatred. But Marianne does not deserve your chains. Edmund's gaze sharpened. You think she will thank you, he murmured. When she learns what her life cost, Lark. Celeste's face crumpled. Then she straightened. She already knows, she said, voice breaking. And she is still standing. Something in Edmund's expression shifted, calculation turning to threat. He turned toward the crowd, voice loud and smooth. This is slander, he announced. A grieving widow's hysteria. A desperate attempt to avoid paying debts owed, murmurs rippled. Celeste lifted her chin. Then let the court hear it, she said. Let a real inquiry happen. Into you. Edmund's eyes flashed. And then, unexpectedly, another voice spoke from the doorway. A man's voice, firm. Perhaps we should. The judge's cousin, one of Edmund's dinner guests from weeks ago, stepped into the shop, face serious. He held the handbill in his hand. I've read this, he said. And if half of it is true, Edmund Leroux has committed fraud. Edmund's face tightened. This is absurd. The man's gaze hardened. So is buying a girl at auction to silence a scandal, he said. Edmund's eyes flicked toward the back room. The place I hid. He took a step. Celeste stepped in front of him, blocking, small but fierce. You will not touch her, she repeated. For a heartbeat, I thought Edmund would strike her. Instead, he smiled coldly. Very well, he said softly. We will do this properly. He turned sharply and walked out, leaving the room buzzing like a hive. Sabine grabbed my arm, eyes fierce. "He gonna come with warrants," she hissed. "He gonna come with men." My mother turned toward me, shaking. "We have to move you," she whispered. "Now!" I stared at her. "What about Lark?" I whispered. "If he has her—" My mother's face tightened. "Then we must find her before he buries her," she said. The next days became a chase through law and shadow. Edmund filed petitions to seize the printer, to arrest Sabine for incitement, to reclaim me as property that had fled. But the scandal had already spilled into New Orleans papers, carried by merchants, and gossip like plague. People love a downfall, especially when it is a man who pretends to be righteous. Still, Edmund was dangerous. He had money, allies, men who owed him. My mother moved like a woman possessed. She bribed, begged, threatened. She slept little. She wrote letters with shaking hands. She visited the church again and again, searching, leaving offerings like prayers. And I, caught between identities, learned to be invisible when needed. Sabine taught me how to move through town without drawing attention. Head down, shoulders rounded, silence. Odette appeared in the night like a ghost again, bringing news. "They searched the church," she whispered. "They found blood." My stomach dropped. "Blood?" Odette's eyes were wet. "Not much," she whispered quickly. "Could be from a struggle. Could be from anything." She swallowed. "But Lark is gone." My mother's face crumpled, then hardened. "He took her," she whispered. I felt cold rage spread through me. If Edmund had taken Lark, he would not keep her alive unless he had to. He would silence her. And if he silenced her, he would silence the last living thread that connected me to my origin. I could not let that happen. That night I made my decision, not as Miss Marianne, not as property, as a person who had learned what survival demanded. "I'm going back," I told Sabine, voice steady. Sabine stared. "You crazy," she whispered. "He'll kill you." "I know," I said, "but I know his house. I know his habits. And if he has her, he will keep her somewhere hidden. Somewhere he thinks no one will look." My mother grabbed my shoulders, eyes wild. "No," she whispered, "I will not lose you too." "You already lost me once," I said softly, and watched pain flash across her face. "But you can help me save her now." Tears slid down my mother's cheeks. "Marianne," I took her hands. "I don't know what we are to each other anymore," I whispered. "But I know what we have done. And I know what we must do." My mother closed her eyes, trembling. Then she nodded once, sharp. "Odette," she whispered. "Get the horse." Odette's eyes widened. "Madame!" "Now!" my mother snapped. Sabine cursed under her breath, then grabbed a small knife and shoved it into my hand. "Don't be stupid," she whispered. I nodded. We left town before dawn, riding hard toward Edmund's estate. The cane field stretched like a sea in the early light, dew glittering. My heart hammered. Fear and determination braided tight. When we reached the edge of Edmund's land, we left the horse hidden under trees. Odette stayed with the horse, ready to flee. My mother and I moved on foot, slipping through familiar shadows. For the first time in my life, I moved through a plantation, not as its daughter, but as a thief. It was strangely liberating. We approached the big house from the back where the kitchens were. Mavis met us there, waiting like she had been expecting this moment. "You came," she whispered. My mother nodded, eyes fierce. "Where is she?" Mavis's face tightened. "I don't know," she whispered. "But I know where Edmund been going at night." She pointed toward the old carriage house at the edge of the property, the one unused, half-rotted. "He going there," Mavis whispered. "And Clara don't know." My mother's eyes narrowed. "Then that's where." We moved toward the carriage house, keeping low. As we approached, I heard something faint, a sound I recognized in my bones now. A muffled sob. My blood turned to ice. We slipped to the side window. The boards were cracked enough to see through. Inside, lantern light flickered, and there, bound to a chair, was Lark. Her face was bruised, her hair disheveled, her eyes fierce even through pain. Edmund stood in front of her, calm, controlled. In his hand he held the velvet pouch. The ring. He had found the packet. My stomach clenched. Edmund's voice was low, smooth. "Tell me where the other papers are," he said. "Tell me who has them." Lark spat blood onto the floor. Edmund sighed, as if disappointed. "You are stubborn," he murmured. "It is almost admirable." He leaned closer. "But stubbornness does not change outcomes." Lark's eyes burned. "You think you can erase truth," she rasped. Edmund smiled faintly. "Truth," he said, "is whatever survives." My mother made a small sound beside me. Rage, grief, nausea. I grabbed her wrist, holding her back. We needed a plan. We needed... But my mother did not wait. She burst through the door like a storm. "Edmund!" she screamed. Edmund whirled, shock flashing across his face for the first time. "Celeste!" he spat. "What the—" My mother rushed him, slapping him hard across the face. The sound cracked. Edmund staggered, more stunned by the insult than the pain. "You monster!" my mother hissed. "You would torture a woman to protect your own filth." Edmund's eyes blazed. "You have no right—" "No right?" my mother screamed. "I stole her child. I lied. I built my life on her pain. And even I would not—" Edmund's face twisted with fury. He reached for her. I moved without thinking. I lunged forward and drove Sabine's knife into Edmund's arm. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to shock. Edmund roared, stumbling back. His eyes snapped to me, wild, furious. "Marianne," he hissed, "you ungrateful—" "Don't call me that," I spat, trembling. "You bought me like an animal." Edmund's gaze flicked toward Lark, toward the ropes. He reached for a pistol on a crate. My blood turned to ice. My mother grabbed a lantern and hurled it at him. Glass shattered, oil splashed, flame leapt hungry. Edmund cursed, stumbling away from the sudden fire. Smoke filled the carriage house. Lark coughed, eyes wide. I rushed to her, hands shaking as I cut the ropes. "Hold on," I whispered. Lark's fingers clutched my wrist, surprisingly strong. "You," she rasped. "You came back." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "for everything." Lark's eyes held mine. "Save me first," she rasped. "Then you can be sorry." We moved fast. My mother grabbed Lark's other arm, supporting her. Edmund, coughing, lunged toward us through smoke, pistol raised. "You will not leave!" he snarled. The fire crackled behind him, light turning his face demonic. My mother stepped forward, placing herself between Edmund and us. "You will have to shoot me," she said, voice steady. Edmund's eyes glittered. "Gladly," he hissed. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the pistol, the smoke, the flame. Then a new voice shouted from the doorway. "Drop it!" Mr. Grady, the overseer, stood there, holding a rifle, eyes wide with fear. Behind him, other men gathered. Workers, enslaved men with tools. Mavis with her face hard. The fire had drawn attention. The scandal had already cracked Edmund's authority. Now his cruelty was exposed in lantern light. Edmund's eyes flicked over the crowd. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Grady's rifle shook slightly. "You shoot her," Grady warned, "and the whole parish gonna know you done it." Edmund's jaw clenched. "You would threaten your master." Grady swallowed. "I ain't threatening," he said. "I'm protecting myself." Edmund's gaze snapped to me cold. "You think this saves you," he hissed. "I will hunt you." I lifted my chin, shaking but fierce. "Then hunt," I said. "But you won't do it quietly." Edmund's eyes burned. Then slowly he lowered the pistol. Not surrender. Calculation. "Fine," he said softly. "Take your women." He stepped back, letting us pass, but as we moved toward the door, he leaned close enough that only I could hear. "You cannot outrun what you are," he whispered. His words were meant to chain my mind, but my mind was already changing shape. Outside, dawn was breaking, pale and indifferent. We moved fast toward the trees, where Odette waited with the horse. Lark stumbled, coughing, supported by my mother and me. Behind us, smoke rose from the carriage house like a signal. We reached the trees. Odette's eyes widened at the sight of Lark. "Oh," she whispered. We mounted awkwardly, Lark between us, and rode hard toward town. By the time we reached St. James, the story had already begun to spread. Edmund LaRue had been found holding a woman in secret. There had been fire. There had been witnesses. And most importantly, there had been proof. Lark, though weak, was alive. A living witness has power no paper can match. The next hearing was not like the first. This time, the courtroom was packed not just with curious townsfolk, but with men who smelled opportunity. Journalists from New Orleans, lawyers sniffing scandal, planters eager to see Edmund fall. My mother stood again. But this time, she did not wear black like a mourner. She wore white. Not innocence. Defiance. Lark sat beside her, wrapped in a shawl, her face bruised but her eyes blazing. I sat behind them, hands shaking but free of iron. Because for the first time, the court hesitated to chain the girl everyone was watching. Edmund stood across the room, his arm bandaged, his face tight with controlled fury. The judge looked uncomfortable because now the case was not just about law. It was about embarrassment. And embarrassment is one of the few forces that can make powerful men move, Lark testified. She spoke of being forced into Henry's house, of Celeste taking the baby, of Henri promising freedom and delaying it, of Edmund threatening her, selling her away, then hunting her when she returned. She did not describe every cruelty in detail. She didn't have to. The room understood enough in the spaces between her words. My mother testified too, fully, painfully. She confessed not as a heroic savior, but as a woman who had loved and possessed and lied. She did not ask forgiveness. She asked only that Marianne not be punished for adult sins. Then, to everyone's shock, Mr. Grady testified. He spoke of Edmund's secret imprisonment of Lark, of threats, of the fire. He did not do it out of morality. He did it because he feared being dragged down with Edmund. But in this world, fear can serve truth as well as courage. The judge listened, sweating. Edmund's lawyer argued. He tried to discredit Lark, calling her bitter, unstable. He tried to paint Celeste as hysterical. He tried to claim the packet was forged. Then Sabine stepped forward, calm as a knife, and presented the handbill trail, the printer's records, witnesses who saw the packet removed from the church wall. And finally, Odette, brave and trembling, testified that Henri had spoken of the hidden packet long before his death. The courtroom hummed with tension. At last, the judge spoke. His voice was reluctant because admitting error is hard for men who wield law like a baton. Given new evidence, he said, the court finds that the sale of the girl was executed under fraudulent manipulation of the estate by Edmund LaRue. The purchase is void. The girl shall not be held as property by Edmund LaRue. A wave of murmurs swept the room. My breath caught. Not held as Edmund's property, but what was I, legally? The judge continued, uncomfortable. However, the question of the girl's status remains. Lark's hand clenched in her lap. My mother's eyes burned. Then the judge sighed, as if choosing the least unpleasant path. Given the extraordinary circumstances, the court grants a petition for manumission contingent upon payment to settle outstanding claims. Money. Always money. My mother lifted her chin. I will pay, she said sharply. Edmund laughed, harsh. With what? He snapped. Your estate is... Sabine stepped forward, holding up papers. The New Orleans Abolition Society offered funds, she said calmly. Anonymous donors, she added, eyes glittering, because the donors were not anonymous at all. They were people who wanted their names away from scandal, but their influence counted. The judge blinked, startled. Edmund's face went white. The judge cleared his throat. Then, he said, the petition is granted. Granted. My ears rang. I stared at my hands as if expecting them to still be cuffed. But they were free. The courtroom erupted in noise. My mother turned toward me, tears streaming. She reached for me, then stopped, trembling. Lark looked at me too. Her gaze complicated. Pain, resentment, curiosity, and something like reluctant recognition. I stood slowly, legs shaking. I did not run into my mother's arms. I did not fall dramatically. I simply breathed. Because freedom is not fireworks. Sometimes it is just the quiet absence of iron. Edmund stood rigid, rage shaking his shoulders. His lawyer leaned close, whispering. Edmund's gaze snapped to mine one last time, full of hatred. "This isn't over," his eyes said. But something else flickered there too. Fear. Because now his lies were exposed, and men like Edmund do not fear justice. They fear public memory. In the weeks that followed, my life did not become a simple story of rescue and redemption. Because nothing about this world was simple. My mother returned to Cypress Saint, but the house was no longer a stage for elegance. It was a relic. People whispered. Society shunned her. Friends stopped calling. She had sacrificed her place to save me, yes, but she had also revealed herself as a thief of a child. Her punishment was not prison. It was isolation. She accepted it like penance. Lark did not return to Cypress Saint. She would not. The quarters held too much pain. The big house held too many ghosts. Instead, she stayed in town with Sabine, working in a sewing shop that served free women of color. She moved carefully, because the law could grant papers but not safety. And I no longer miss Marianne, not property, not fully anything, hovered between worlds like a wound, refusing to close. People in town stared at me with fascination. Some admired my tragedy. Some resented my escape. Some pitied me, which I hated most of all. I tried to visit Lark one afternoon, trembling. She opened the door and stared at me for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "What you want?" I swallowed. "To know you," I whispered, "if you'll allow it." Lark's mouth tightened. "Know me," she repeated. "You think you can come in here and make a family out of what they broke?" Tears burned my eyes. "No," I whispered. "I don't think that. I don't want to live with a hole where truth should be." Lark studied me, eyes sharp. "Truth hurt," she said. "You sure you want it now?" I nodded. Lark sighed, stepping aside. "Come in then," she said. "But don't expect it to feel like comfort." Inside her small room, there were no chandeliers, no silk, just plain furniture and a small window letting in sun. Lark sat across from me and spoke for hours. She spoke of being a girl like me once, young, full of hope, then swallowed by a system that turned bodies into currency. She spoke of Henri, my father, not as a romantic villain, but as a coward with power and guilt. She spoke of Celeste, not as my mother, or not mother, but as a woman who could love fiercely and still commit theft without blinking. She spoke of herself, how she had tried to run, how she had hidden, how she had survived. When she finished, her eyes were tired. "That's the truth," she said. I sat shaking, tears silent. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Lark watched me. "Sorry don't change what happened," she said. "I know," I whispered. "But My voice cracked. "I want to do something." Lark's gaze sharpened. "Like what?" I swallowed. "I can read," I said softly. "I can write. I can speak to people who would never listen to you." Lark's mouth tightened. "You mean you can use the same world that protected you," she said, "to pry open doors?" I nodded. Lark stared at me for a long moment. Finally she nodded once. "Then do it," she said. "But don't do it for guilt. Do it because you finally see." I left her room that day with a new kind of weight. Not chains. Responsibility. Edmund did not vanish quietly, as men like him rarely do. He fought. He filed suits. He spread rumors that Lark was a liar, that Celeste was insane, that I had been manipulated by abolitionists. But his social power was cracked, and cracks spread. Clara left him within months, returning to her family in New Orleans with her head high and her heart bruised. She told everyone Edmund had been abusive. Whether it was fully true or partly strategic, it served her. Grady disappeared, running north to avoid Edmund's revenge. The plantation workers whispered that Edmund's fields began to fail, not from supernatural punishment, but from something more mundane and more lethal: distrust. A man cannot control people who no longer fear his story. One evening, months later, a letter arrived at my mother's house. No return address. My mother's hand shook as she opened it, expecting threat. Inside was one line written in a hand I recognized too well. "You cannot outrun what you are." My mother stared at it, then looked up at me, eyes haunted. I took the letter gently, and for the first time, I understood the deeper truth of Edmund's threat, not as prophecy, but as challenge. You cannot outrun what you are, so you must decide what you will become. I did not remain at Cypress Saint. The big house felt like a museum of theft. The portraits on the walls felt like accusations. The room smelled of a life that was never truly mine. My mother begged me to stay, not as an order, but as a plea. "I have nothing left," she whispered one night, tears slipping down her face. "Only you." I sat across from her, heart aching. "I am not leaving to punish you," I said softly. "I'm leaving because I need to learn who I am when I'm not trapped inside your lie." My mother's face crumpled. "I loved you," she whispered. "I know," I said, voice shaking. "That's what makes it cruel." I left with Sabine, not as a daughter, not as a servant, just as a girl walking toward a future that did not have a name yet. In New Orleans, I worked in the printer's shop, helping set type, helping copy letters, helping write appeals. I listened to abolitionist speeches that made my skin prickle with shame and hope in equal measure. I learned the machinery of words, the way ink could travel farther than a carriage, the way a story could slip under doors Edmund couldn't lock. Sometimes men looked at me with that old hunger, the kind that saw young women as something to be claimed. I learned to navigate it without surrendering to it, choosing crowded rooms, choosing allies, choosing visibility when secrecy was dangerous. Sometimes women looked at me with suspicion, because my face still carried the ghost of privilege. I did not argue with them. I worked. I wrote. I learned to make my voice useful. And sometimes, on nights when the city air was thick with humidity and the sound of music drifted from taverns, Sabine would hand me a small cup of coffee and sit beside me on the steps. "You miss being Miss Marianne?" she would ask, blunt as always. I would stare out at the street lights, thinking of silk and chandeliers, of a birthday morning when I thought my life was guaranteed. "No," I would say quietly. "I miss being ignorant, but I don't miss the lie." Sabine would nod. "Good," she'd say. "Ignorance ain't a home. It's a cage with prettier curtains." Years later, after the war came like a storm and ripped through everything, after uniforms changed and laws shifted, and freedom became a word everyone fought over, I returned once to St. James Parish. Cypress Saint was quieter. The fields were altered. The big house stood like a tired ghost, no longer the center of a universe. My mother lived there still, older, thinner, her hair silver at her temples. When she saw me, she did not rush forward. She simply stood at the doorway, eyes wet. "You came back," she whispered. I nodded. "For a moment," I said. We sat in the parlor where I had once played piano. Dust lay on the keys. My mother looked at me carefully. "Do you hate me?" she asked. The question was a tremor running through her whole body. I stared at her hands, hands that had held me as a baby, hands that had signed papers as a mistress of enslaved people, hands that had slapped Edmund in a burning carriage house. "I don't know how to hate you cleanly," I admitted softly, "because you are not one thing." My mother's eyes filled with tears. I am sorry, she whispered again, like prayer. I know, I said. But sorry isn't the end. We sat in silence. Then my mother reached into a drawer and pulled out something small. My pearls. She placed them on the table between us like an offering. I kept them, she whispered. I didn't know what else to do. I stared at them. Pearls. Symbols of a life that had been mine and not mine. Gifts bought with a system that had devoured people. I touched them lightly, then pushed them back. Keep them, I said softly. Let them remind you. My mother flinched, then nodded, tears falling. As I stood to leave, she whispered, What do you call yourself now? I paused at the doorway. The question was simple, but it held everything. The name I had been given was built on theft. The name in the baptism record was a ghost. The name the world had chained me with was a weapon used to erase me. I turned back. I call myself Marianne, I said. Not because it's pure, because it's mine now. I survived long enough to claim it. My mother's face crumpled. And Lark, she whispered. Does she lives, I said quietly. And she is not your punishment. She is her own person. My mother nodded, swallowing sobs. I stepped out onto the gallery. The air smelled of river and earth. I looked out at the road, the same road that had once carried me away in iron. Now it carried me forward by choice. The truth had sold me into chains, yes. But it had also forced me to see what I had been living inside. And once you see a cage for what it is, you cannot pretend it's bars or decoration. You can only decide every day what you will build in the open air beyond it.